If you're like me, you might be really good at the Super Mario Bros. 3 in-spade card matching minigame. You may not even have to write anything down. But you're also probably just as good as me at the roulette minigame. In other words, you're not very good. It's not our fault, the game is rigged. Both the card matching game and the roulette game use a random number generator to spice up the gameplay. That means we get to take a look at another LFSR RNG implementation. We'll find out how the card matching game is rather easy, but the roulette game is nearly impossible to win. Retro Game Mechanics Explained is brought to you by its YouTube members, Patreon supporters, and viewers like you. Thank you. So first, how does Super Mario Bros. 3 generate random numbers? It uses a 15-bit linear feedback shift register. This is like the fourth LFSR we've seen on this channel, so I'll just be brief. There are 15 bits stored in memory as the random number output. Every time the game needs a new random number, it shifts all the bits over one position to the right and fills in the new bit on the left. It uses the 7th and 15th bit from the left of the old number to determine what this new bit will be. The two bits are exclusively ORed together. If they are the same, a 0 is shifted in, and if they are different, a 1 is shifted in. This method of generating random numbers is fairly decent for how quick and easy it is to implement, which is probably why we've seen it in a handful of different games. Now, 15 bits is a weird number of bits to an 8-bit processor, so there are actually 16 bits in total. The game just remembers the last bit that got shifted out before it drops off. Actually, it's not just 16 bits, but 72 bits it remembers in total. In practice, each of these 9 bytes are used by each of the different sprite slots when a level is loaded. That way, if multiple enemies on screen needed a random number on the same frame, they would be given 2 different values. Doing this is quite questionable though, since the standard way to get more random numbers would be to just shift the LFSR as many times as needed. The reason why keeping so many bits around like this is a bad idea is that you get a lot of correlation between old and new random numbers. Just look at what happens after shifting the LFSR 8 times. Most of the extra bytes here are identical, just in a different position. Now, Super Mario Bros. 3 doesn't use that much RNG relatively speaking, so this isn't too big of a deal, but it is a fun thing to point out. The big question is, how is the roulette game random at all? There are 3 sections to the roulette, and every time you press a button, one of the segments stops. It seems like it should just purely be a game of timing then. Well, there is a bit of a catch, of course. Each of the 3 segments can be in one of 6 different states. We're only going to need to look at 3 of them for the purposes of this video. In state 0, the segment is spinning freely. When you press a button to stop it, it starts to slow down. But the slowing down state is state number 2. What about state number 1? State 1 is what I'm going to call the rigged delay state. When you press a button to stop a segment, it actually goes into the rigged delay state for a short period of time. Only after that delay period is complete does it go into state 2 and actually start slowing down. Let's look at the code. The majority of this code only runs on the frame that you press a button to stop one of the roulette segments. That's what this first bit of code checks for. Then, each of the 3 segments are processed one after the other. Their code has the same structure, so if you line them up like this, you can spot the differences. First, the game checks the current state of the segment. In this entire block of code, it is looking to update the state of the segments from 0, spinning, to 1, rigged delay. So if the segment isn't in state 0 right now, then we can just ignore it. The last 2 segments also check the state of the previous segment. The previous segment needs to at least be in state 2, slowing down, before this segment can be stopped. This is so that the player can't just mash the A button to stop all of the segments right away. If those checks clear, then it's time to actually update the state of the roulette segment. First, the state is incremented by 1, going from 0 to 1. Then, a random number is fetched from the random number generator. Some bitwise operations are performed on that value, and it gets set as that segment's rig delay. This is the number of frames the segment will wait for before it starts to slow down. Finally, all three segments converge to this point in the code that plays the little beep sound. What we're mainly interested in here is the operations on that random number. A random number fetched directly from the LFSR has a range from 0 to 255. The first segment logically ANDs this value with 1111 in binary, or 15 in decimal. This effectively limits the range of the value from 0 to 15 now. Then the logical OR afterwards effectively adds 32 to the total. This results in the first segment's rig delay being in a range from 32 to 47 frames long. The other two segments do similar operations with different numbers. The second segment ANDs with 31 and ORs with 32 to get a range of 32 to 63 frames. And the third segment ANDs with 63 and ORs with 64 to get a range of 64 to 127 frames. This means the last segment can have a delay of over 2 seconds. The first two segments spin fast enough that each item only has about a 19 frame window for you to hit what you want. The first segment has a variance of 16 frames, so you have about a 3 frame window to guarantee a certain item regardless of how long the rig delay lasts. But the second segment has a variance of 32 frames, so you're just out of luck. The third segment spins even faster and has only a 16 frame window for each item, but it has the largest variance of 64, which is essentially one full revolution of the roulette, which pretty much means that the final segment is purely random and that you have no control over it whatsoever. This wouldn't be a video about Super Mario Bros. 3 without some programming errors, or at the very least a programming oversight, of which there is one during the roulette game. Notice how in this code that the random numbers loaded here are 3 different bytes of the RNG LFSR. The first byte isn't used at all, but the second, third, and fourth bytes are used for each of the respective segments. However, there is no code here that actually shifts the LFSR in between each button press. This turns out to be a good thing, since that prevents the problem with the output correlation like I mentioned earlier. However, normally, there is a routine higher up in the game's code that always shifts the LFSR, even if a random number isn't needed on this frame. For example, just idling on the map screen shifts the LFSR once per frame. Even idling on the cutscene with Toad just before the roulette loads shifts the entire LFSR, even though literally nothing is happening. However, when idling during the roulette game itself, only the first 2 bytes of the LFSR are shifted at all. Instead of the routine that shifts the entire LFSR being called like usual, a copy of that routine is run instead, but it only processes the first 2 bytes for some reason. This means that the second RNG byte is being shuffled up while you are idle, but the third and fourth bytes are fixed the moment you exit the cutscene, which in turn means that the amount of rig delay for the second and third segments is determined exactly at that moment. But the rig delay for the first segment is only determined when you press a button to stop the segment. Okay, so the roulette game is basically impossible to win every time. How come the N-Spade card matching game is so relatively easy? I mean, it's a game of skill instead of chance, and even less if you bother to write things down. But if you play a lot of Super Mario Bros. 3, you'd know that it's even simpler than a normal card matching game. In fact, there are only 8 possible arrangements of the cards. If you know all of the arrangements beforehand, you can just check 2 cards, and you'll know exactly which arrangement you are presented with. And since you're allowed to make one mistake before being kicked out, you can theoretically always match all of the cards every time. At first, I thought that maybe the 8 arrangements were hard-coded into the game, and that the RNG is used to pick a number from 1 to 8 to pick one of these setups. But no, the game does actually shuffle the cards properly each time. Of course, it's due to a programming error that the cards aren't as random as they could have been. In the card matching game, there are 18 cards, 4 mushrooms, 4 fire flowers, 4 superstars, 2 1-ups, 2 10-coin cards, and 2 20-coin cards. The amount of ways you can arrange 18 cards is 18 factorial, which is 6.4 quadrillion. But you have to account for the fact that there are multiple of each card, so this brings the total number of possibilities to a more manageable 57.9 billion. What went wrong for this to be brought down to just 8? Let's look at the algorithm for shuffling the cards. There are 2 parts to the shuffling process. There's the rotate part and the triple swap part. In a single rotate step, the first 14 cards are all moved 1 position higher. The 15th card then moves back to the first position. This means that the last 3 cards aren't touched in this step. I want to believe that this was done intentionally. The last 3 cards are always a Mushroom, Fireflower, and Superstar. This was probably just a little Easter egg to make the card matching game easier, if you ever noticed it. In a single triple swap step, 3 cards are swapped. The 3 cards are always separated by 4 cards between them. So for example, the 4th card, the 9th card, and the 14th card would all exchange positions, moving to a lower position, where the lowest becomes the highest. In one single card shuffle, some number of rotates and some number of triple swaps occur, and a total of 3 card shuffles happen each time a new card matching game starts. How many possible arrangements of cards are there after this shuffling process occurs? We can try to calculate it. I'll presume that we want to preserve the positions of the last 3 cards, so those are off limits. During the rotate phase, any number of card rotations can happen. Since only 15 cards are being rotated, that means this step can have 15 different outcomes. During the triple swap phase, any number of triple swaps can happen. There are 5 possible triplets of cards, and each triplet can be swapped once, twice, or none at all. This means there are 3 to the power of 5, or 243 different outcomes. Each shuffle process does both of these operations, so one shuffle makes 15 times 243, or 3,645 outcomes. And since there are 3 total shuffles, this means there are 3,645 to the power of 3 total outcomes, or just over 48.4 billion. Now, this is more than the total possible number of arrangements of even 15 cards, 757 million, so there must be some duplicates, a lot of duplicates. But this shows that the shuffling algorithm isn't a bad algorithm at all. But a few things happened on the programming side that make it not so great. Let's look at the code. Here is the card shuffling loop. The main counter is set to 2, which means the loop runs 3 times in total. A random number is generated and logically ANDed with 31 in order to get a random number from 0 to 31. This gets copied to the Y register and will dictate the number of times the cards get rotated. Rotating these cards more than 15 times is pointless, but that's just how it was coded. The 15th card gets stored in a temporary memory location while the others are moved over 1 position. Then that card gets written to the first slot. This loop runs multiple times according to the random number generated. Then the triple swap comes next. A card is put into a temporary memory location, the card 5 slots later gets put into that position, the card 10 slots after the first gets put into that slot, and then the first card gets put in that last slot. Exactly which triplet is swapped depends on the X register, and in the game's implementation, the X register is set to 0. This means that only the 1st, 6th, and 11th cards get swapped each time. They are the only triplet to ever get swapped, and they will only ever get swapped exactly 1 time. This is the first oversight of the shuffling routine. This part of the code is structured like a loop, too. The X register is decremented by 2, and there is a branch back up to the start of the triple swap code, if that keeps X positive. But since X is only ever set to 0, this makes X -2, so the branch back never happens. In theory, this phase could have produced 243 different outcomes, but in reality, it only produces 1. This is the end of the shuffle loop, and if there are more shuffles to do, the counter is decremented and control flow moves back up to the top here. With the loss of the elaborate triple swap, we can only rely on the rotate step to provide all the shuffling power. This would still give us 15 to the power 3, or 3,375 different outcomes. But unfortunately, an error reduces that 15 down to 2. See this step where I said the game generates a random number from 0 to 31? This JSR instruction is what shifts the LFSR and generates the next random number. However, there is no load instruction after it that actually reads the number that the LFSR just generated. Let's look inside the randomize routine real quick. After setting up 2 counters to help with the number of total bytes used, 9, the first byte of the LFSR is read and the 7th bit is extracted using an AND instruction. Then the second byte is read and the 15th bit of the LFSR is extracted. Those 2 bits are XORed together and the result gets shifted into the highest bit of the first byte of the LFSR. And then all 9 of the bytes are shifted over to make room for the new bit. Notice how the A register never holds the final result of this process. The A register actually only holds a single bit, that new bit that got shifted into the top of the LFSR. And not only that, but it's in the second position, meaning that the A register, after this routine runs, holds either the value 0 or 2, and nothing else. Going back to our card shuffling routine, that means that our counter, the Y register, only ever holds 0 or 2. That means that this 15 card rotate step only runs once or 3 times per shuffle. That's why this rotate step only produces 2 different outcomes. There are 3 shuffles total, so the final total possible outcomes is 2 to the power 3, or just a measly 8. It's so few that I can actually show off all 8 possible arrangements of cards and how they come to be. This is the initial set of cards. This is what it looks like before any of the shuffling occurs. First, we rotate the first 15 cards either once or 3 times. Then we swap the first, 6th, and 11th cards. Rotate once or thrice, triple swap. And finally, one more rotate once or thrice, and triple swap. These are the 8 possible arrangements of cards in the N-Spade card matching game. Without changing the structure of the code too much, there are 2 quick changes that would have drastically improved this implementation. First is to, actually load in the random number that gets generated by the LFSR. That alone increases the number of possibilities to 3,375. The second change would be to use the RNG to also determine the number of triple swaps. While still preserving the last 3 cards, we can use this loop to produce at least 4 different outcomes, which improves the number of arrangements to 216,000. And if we didn't care about those last 3 cards, we could bump this up to 8 different outcomes, and also increase the size of the card rotate step to include all 18 cards. This would increase the total number of arrangements to almost 3 million, assuming there are no duplicates, which there probably are. Thank you for watching. How many more videos do you think it'll take for another LFSR to show up? I can at least guarantee that the next video won't have one. I guess we'll just have to wait and see.